Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today for our episode, we will talk with Sheena Schleicher, strategic digital marketer and SEO consultant. This is my first time recording the podcast in the lower 48 of the United States, and you know what? I miss being able to humble brag about my hard life traveling as a digital nomad. I'll be back on the road soon enough, and I'm sure you're looking forward to those Carmen Sandiego type updates. Speaking of San Diego, that is where Sheena Schleicher calls home. See what I did there? Like many of my podcast guests, I met Sheena online before we ever met in person. We're both fans of Moz and have spent a lot of our time contributing and learning from that community. As we've gotten to know each other professionally, I've learned that we share many of the same values when it comes to approaches to business, consulting, and sharing our knowledge. This conversation with Sheena was full of great advice for marketers. She talks about being bold, but not blind, and shares several of the pieces of advice that she received along the way. Sheena is as genuine as they come, and it's no surprise that she is successful as a marketer. I particularly loved her story about how she was able to help a blog by giving them free SEO advice and how that paved the path for her future opportunities. Before we get into Sheena's journey, I wanted to have a word from another unofficial sponsor. Today, I wanted to share my experience with GoToWebinar. I've been using this platform for several months to hold live events, and I love that the technology is reliable and integrates well with several other services like your email service. If you want to host a live event, this is the software for you. Visit jeffalytics.com/go-to-webinar to learn more. So let's talk to Sheena Schleicher. Learn about how Sheena found her way in the SEO industry at a young age, how she grew in knowledge and responsibility, and how a freak accident made her decide to become an entrepreneur. For show notes, visit jeffalytics.com/Sheena. All right, we're here today with Sheena Schleicher. Sheena, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. Big fan and really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great. We met in Seattle a couple months ago, and even when I talked then, I was like, we need to get her on the podcast and get her story and learn about how Sheena got into the world of digital marketing and SEO and all the areas that you cover. So let's get into it. Like, when did you first realize that you have a passion for marketing, that you were interested in this area of expertise?
Well, it's kind of a funny question, as I really can't pinpoint any particular moment where I was like, oh my gosh, marketing, that's where I need to be. And really, I think it was just over the years, I kind of kept following and doing more of what I was good at. And that involved a lot of internships and really focusing mostly on writing and doing editorial work. And over time, like I realized that, okay, maybe this isn't the best fit, especially I was working at some print publications and had a pretty big lesson that, okay, these print publications are dying out a little bit, at least the ones that aren't investing in digital at the time. And this is back in 2005, 2006. And so I think I just kept pursuing sort of what I was good at, which was writing at the time and building relationships. And in an interesting way, that sort of led me into the SEO field. And when I first entered SEO field, it was primarily as a copywriter. And I didn't really think of SEO or writing or anything of what I was doing as marketing. I just, it was a very SEO specific agency. And at the time, in 2005, 2006, it just seemed like tactics for getting traffic to your website. It didn't really feel like marketing to me. And also to me, marketing always seemed like this very elite field. And
Yeah.
especially, I was pretty young. I was like 18. And, what I knew of marketing was sort of Hollywood's version of marketing, where it just seemed like these big PR and marketing branding firms in New York and whatnot. And I was like, that's probably not obtainable for me. But then over the years, just doing more of this writing and SEO and getting more involved in what became digital marketing, I started to realize like, maybe I am sort of doing marketing. And in fact, a lot of these people who have marketing titles, like I think I'm doing better work than they are. Like I think I'm creating more compelling content, both written and visual content. And hey, maybe I am a marketer. And so it was sort of this learning process that in fact what I was doing was marketing. So, and I think that took years of sort of finding my way and working in different fields. And it's been about 10 years now of working in what I now would refer to as marketing, but it took me probably 5 years to sort of get to that understanding.
Yeah, it's pretty common for marketers to have that type of journey. We end up going through the process of we're good at something. We have a skill of some sort. In your case, it's writing. In my case, it was writing or creating websites. And then that eventually gets folded into this whole concept of the marketing stack. Because what it comes down to, and I've written about this a few times, is that it's all about getting somebody interested in your products or services, just getting somebody interested in what you have to say. And you can imagine that if that's really what marketing is, or effective marketing is just getting somebody interested, then writing is a great way to do that. Writing is one of the most important ways that you can do that. So even though you set out to do one thing, you sort of become a marketer because you are effective, because you're getting people interested. And that's really how a lot of marketers are born, is not so much based on they went to school for it, they had a formal education. It's because they found this skill and then they just exercise that skill and they get interested in it. And once you learn that you have the power to get somebody interested in what you have to say, it goes a long way from there. I mean, that pretty much just opens the doors for everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm curious, so did you go to school for writing, or what did you go to school to do?
So my journey into academia was kind of not very well planned out. And whenever I'm asked about this, I feel like it's important to share a little bit about my family history. And just because it shaped so much of that path. And so I came from sort of a turbulent family background. And I think I used school as sort of an escape. And school always came pretty easily to me. And I just continued to use that as something like to sort of drown out some of the issues at home. But no one in my family had gone to college, had graduated, or really had any plans for me to go to school. And I remember come my senior year of high school, I was eligible to go to UCs and I had, really good grades, but I just didn't think it was in the cards for me. And a few people who, fortunately sort of opened my eyes to, hey, like, you can you can pursue bigger things than you think you can. I thought I was just going to get a job after high school and go from, just make it work as best I could. But, a few people sort of spoke some truth into my life, and I'm forever grateful for that. But that led me to signing up almost before right before the deadline at a local community college. And I almost didn't even really understand the concept of declaring a major. I just thought, okay, well, at least I'm here and I'll try to get my general education figured out and, go from there. And I knew from about my junior year in high school that writing was the only thing I somewhat excelled in. Like I said, I was pretty decent student across the board, and a lot of things came pretty easily to me. And writing was just the one thing that stood out a little bit more than the other areas. And so I was like, okay, well, that's what I'm good at. I guess that's what I'll end up doing
Yep.
down the road. So going into college, I was like thinking that an English major might make sense. I really had no clue. So I sort of pursued that English major path, found out very quickly that it wasn't quite for me. I loved writing, but I didn't love reading, which was kind of funny because I love it
hmm
now. But as an English major, that's primarily what you do for a lot of those years. So I switched to communication. And that was sort of a default major for me. And I think it is for a lot of people, but it worked out so well. It really connected me with some amazing professors that really empowered me over the years. And it showed me that communication is so much more than a default major. It really taught me how to actually communicate and
Yep.
interact with people with confidence. And so, yeah, I pursued the communications degree. I ended up transferring to Cal State San Marcos after 2 years. And the whole time, knowing that I didn't have like a family that was financially or even relationally stable. So I knew that, I didn't really have much to fall back on. It was really on my shoulders to make my own success. And I knew that the only way to do that was to get as much experience as I could. And
hmm
I started working at a very, very young age, like 15 or 16 years old. And, I actually, over a couple summers, was like delivering newspapers
hmm
in like the middle of the night almost. And it was just at that point, it was to help my family. And then I just realized, okay, hard work pays off. At that age, finally wanting to apply for like a normal job, which was at a restaurant when I was still in high school, showing that, they saw that I delivered newspapers over my summer. They were like, wow, this girl's a hard worker. I learned the lesson that like hard work pays off personally, but also it shows others that you're committed, to whatever you set your mind to. So yeah, hopefully that answers some of those
Yeah.
questions, but it definitely was a unique path, I think. But I think the more people I share that path with, the more I realize like so many people have, similar situations. And I love sharing it because, they're like, oh, wow, like that's similar to mine. And maybe that's something I can pursue. And really, it comes down to like, in my case, it was a lot of people speaking truth into my life.
Yeah, the more people I talk to on this podcast and that interview, the more that I realize that there's very rarely a clear path. In
Hmm.
fact, to think that somebody has a clear path, that usually, I mean, what would be the path? You can't really go to school to learn SEO or to learn online marketing. There's some classes coming up and going out, and there's classes that are available, but it's not really that structured of a program. And so, since it's so
Hmm.
new, people find it in different ways, and it's really cool to see all these diverse backgrounds coming in there. And the other thing that's interesting to me is this whole concept of the communication major. So I have a communications major as well, and a lot of it does get a bad rap as being the easy one, the one that people take when they don't think about something or when they don't really have an idea as to what they want to do, or it's an easy major. But I learned a
Hmm.
lot, like you said, about everything from rhetoric to communication to even I even learned in my communication classes how to edit audio and video. And part of the way that I'm able to do this podcast is from the stuff that I learned in that class. So communication is a very valuable skill. It's actually in many ways as valuable as my computer science degree as I go through the world of marketing, because it taught me a lot around how to be more clear with what I'm saying. And it teaches you writing, and it teaches you things that are really valuable as marketers. And so having, depending on what track you want to go, if you want to be focused on the content and being clear with people and getting people to listen to what you have to say, it's a really valuable major. And as you said, it is more focused even than English. It is more focused on the production and the ability to write than maybe English is, because English is a lot of focus on reading, like you had said.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, the other thing that I love about the communication degree, at least how it worked out for me, is that I felt like it was a very well-rounded field of study. And for someone who didn't really know what I was going to pursue, it sort of set me up that come graduation, well, and I had actually done some internships prior to graduating, but come graduation, when I was like, okay, it's time to really get this figured out. It was sort of like I had so many options. I could go in so many different directions. And I happened to stumble across a copywriting internship on Craigslist that was at an SEO agency. And that's sort of how I stepped into this field. I sort of knew what SEO was because prior to that, I had been an internship for a couple of years at a major print publication. And
Yep.
uh, actually, my second week at that publication, the they were purchased or acquired by a major corporation called Bonnier Group. And that group was very focused on investing in digital. And this was sort of, it was just a unique time because not many companies realize the value of digital. They seem to be one of the first back in 2006, 2007. And um, the second week I was there, I remember, I'll never forget it. It was such a critical lesson for me to learn. It was that the editor in chief was actually let go because he was so resistant to going digital. He was a little bit stubborn and and stuck in his old ways that print was the way. And it was such a critical lesson for me to learn to see that what I was good at and what I was pursuing needed to be adjusted just a little bit to make sure there was longevity and that it was a sustainable field. So, um, I'll never forget just that lesson of, okay, I need to go digital. And um, with that transition for that particular company, I remember, this big push like, okay, now we have to figure out how to get more of our print content onto the web. And how can we get more readers on the web? People were subscribed to this monthly publication, and now we wanted them to come to the website and drive more traffic there. And I
Yep.
remember like Googling, you know, how to get more readers to your website or things like that. And I came across this term SEO and I had no idea what it was. And I had I did some reading. I even think I probably came across SEO Moz way back in the day, and
Yep.
I was just trying to wrap my head around it. There was no budget. There was very little understanding or acceptance of it in that environment where they were a print publication, sort of being forced to go digital. Um, and so I didn't have a ton of success, but later when I was pursuing other internships or career opportunities, and I stumbled across this SEO agency's copywriting internship, I was like, heck, I know a little bit about that. At least I know
Hmm.
what it stands for,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
tried to do a little more research on it and prepare myself. But that's sort of how I got my into that field.
Interesting. So that's a good, that's like the wake up call that a lot of us need to have, and you got it right away. And that is that traditional industries are being disrupted. And so joining a print publication and seeing somebody let go right away, that's crazy, because it basically teaches you that lesson that this is, none of this stuff is a given. Things that worked in the
Mhm.
past are not necessarily things that are going to work in the future. And so you already know that this is, the areas that I need to focus on are the future. And so you're not really, and I was fortunate enough myself to not be ruled by the past so much, as more being able to be forward thinking and to be able to go towards these things in the future, because that's what I knew was going to happen. I didn't, we both, I guess, benefit from not having the legacy things that we need to support, just knowing that digital is the way to go, and that digital is important. And then the way that we get people to our websites in that area in the digital world is a lot of times through search engines. And that's how we get introduced to SEO. And it's sort of funny that you stumbled on SEO Moz even that early and were introduced to it. That's sort of how, so I got an ebook called Nothing But Net. This is like early 2000s, and it basically taught everything about SEO. It was like, basically before ebooks were even popular, and it was like 100-something page book about SEO. And that's really so how I got started. And then I get introduced to the SEO book and SEO Moz and a lot of these same sources. But it was basically the same thing. We realized that we need to get people to go to websites, or we need to get people interested in what we have to say in a new way. And here we go. Here's this new field. Here's this new opportunity, taking advantage of Google search results.
Mhm.
And so then you said you went and joined an SEO agency. How did that work out for you, being able to do an internship there? Did they give you responsibilities? Did you learn a lot on the job? How did that work out?
Well, that's another interesting story that I love sharing. So I had applied for this internship for a copywriting position, and I didn't receive a call back. And I was super bummed. But then about 2 weeks later, and I was applying for different, internships or positions. And keep in mind, I had just graduated, or, I think I was applying for these right before I graduated, like planning for after graduation. Because again, I knew that okay, I still needed to get more experience. I wasn't quite prepared to just go directly into a career or an actual paid position. I really understood the value of, hey, even if I have to work for free for a little bit, even though I'm out of school, like it'll pay off. That experience will pay off hugely in the connections that I make. So I was, like I said, applying for different internships. I didn't get a call back from the one that I was most interested in. But then about 2 weeks later, and I was going to other interviews, like just sort of had dismissed this other opportunity. But then I get a message from the person. His name's actually John Lincoln, and he has a digital agency now. He contacted me and was like, "Hey, Sheena, I thought you were really interested, but we haven't heard back from you." And immediately I was like, I think he has me confused with someone else. And so I jumped on the call real quick. I called him up. I was like, "Hey, John, like, thanks for calling me, but I think, we actually haven't talked yet." And turns out he had accidentally followed up with me, and he thought he was, following up with someone else he actually interviewed in person. But I
Hmm.
sort of just charmed him, I guess. And we ended up having an interview on that call right when I called him on the spot. And then we followed up with an in person interview. And I remember the biggest question they had was, okay, so this is a copywriting position. You're going to be doing a lot of writing. Can you write for any type of audience? And I was like, sure, why not? Like, I worked for a newspaper, I worked for a magazine. Like, yes, I can do it. So that was what I initially came into. And it was only about 2 months into it, I realized, like, oh, wow, there's like this is a pretty legit field. I should, try and learn as much as I can. And then what had happened, I was getting more involved with client interaction, just sort of shadowing some of the project managers as they were called at the time. I really liked the, sort of client facing aspect of the project management. And I really loved that it was something that I had never like that I didn't know anything about. It was a challenge for me. It was something new. And it was something, that I considered at the time much more technical than anything I had ever learned before, focusing mostly on writing.
Yep.
And then what ended up happening, I was coming to the end of my internship, and one of the project managers or SEO strategists, they were sort of kind of had this big umbrella title for them at the time, but she was going on maternity leave, and she had, several clients that they would either have to hire someone. And I was just sort of at the right place, right time, very serendipitous, where they were like, well, Sheena's just finishing up her internship. She's done well. And they ended up offering me a position. And I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe it. But I was also just so scared. I couldn't believe, I really only had felt confident in my writing at the time. And then to be handed a handful of clients, that was pretty terrifying to me. And it was very much a sink or swim environment, and learn as you go. There wasn't a ton of training, but it forced me to do just that. It forced me to, a lot of people say fake it till you make it, which I sort of hate. And it forced me to actually like learn it until I can teach it.
Yep.
And I realized that my clients really appreciated that approach, that because I was learning it sort of at the same time that they were, they didn't know that, but I was doing my best to empower them as much as empower myself, I guess, as I was learning it. So as I was learning it, I was sharing like everything I knew with them, which went against the agency's sort of way of working a little bit, giving away too much information, which was always a little bit of a struggle for me, because I thought like, why not share this information? Like, it's going to make everyone's lives easier and we'll have more success. And so, yeah, that's how I got into the SEO strategy world.
Well,
and I ended up staying there for 4 years, which, as you can imagine, you learn a lot in 4 years.
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's an interesting thing to think about, is the fake it till you make it and the opportunities. I mean, sometimes all you really need is that first initial break, or even that conversation. So you went from being a resume, which is one of many, people that have things on there. But once you start to put your personality around it, it leads to a more personal connection. And once it looks like this agency owner had a more personal connection with you, it starts to open up opportunities. Now you're not one of 100, you're one of one, and there's a lot behind it. So I think that's a good lesson for anybody, is that if you can do anything in order to form a more personal connection, there'll be more, whether it's loyalty, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but more of an affinity for you when it comes to these things. And so that's really, I think, a lesson for everybody, is if this person is active in the community, maybe meet them at a meetup, or maybe not be so bold as to call them, but you were fortunate that they sort of called you and you had the opportunity, you had some kind of in. But basically looking for an in of some sort can really be an important thing. And then once you have that in, even if you're doing an internship or something that's not maybe as glamorous, once you're inside of a company, and this, we heard this in the Cyrus Shepard interview as well, once you're inside of a company, no matter what you're doing, you can start to have you have a lot more time now than with this person or with the people who make the decisions than you would normally. And a lot of companies prefer to promote internally. They if they know what you're capable of doing, then they're going to promote you, and they can see your output, they can see your work. So that first barrier of just getting noticed in the first place is difficult, and it's sort of fortuitous the way that it happened for you. But I think others can learn from that as well, and that is to make it a more personal conversation, make it more personal about you. And then the cool thing is, though, once you head there, and even if you're managing client relationships and doing the things that you're talking about, you also delivered. You also gave quality results, and you helped educate. An educated client is a good client. They're the best clients because they're in it with you, and you've done a lot of things. I guess it came intuitively to you to help your clients become more educated and to share with them what you're doing. But it seems like it helped you produce great results. And so that's another thing we can all we can all learn from as well, is that if you can share what you're doing, and even if it's just to convince yourself that you're worthy of being there, you will form better relationships than if you sort of keep it in a black box, or you make it act as if you're trying to do magic. Magic doesn't really last very long in a business environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you were there. You said you stayed there for 4 years, and then what made you decide that, how did you progress while you were there, and then why did you decide to move on?
So I think, like a lot of agencies, there was a lot of turnover in the 4 years that I was there. And I was still pretty young, and I just knew that, okay, stick it out. I knew that patience would pay off in my case. And what ended up happening was that I became a pretty senior employee in a short period of time because of that turnover. And the turnover was mostly because of recruiters, I will say. There were a couple of larger San Diego agencies recruiting, everyone that we had. And some
Yep.
of them are still at those companies, which I'm very happy for them. And they found the right fit for them. But for me, I knew that it wasn't the right time for me to make that type of move. Knew I still had a lot to learn, even though it was tempting, the bigger salaries and better benefits, things like that. But I just knew that, for one, I really cared about the clients that I was managing. And I felt, a certain sense of loyalty to the company, but also to my clients, and making sure they were taken care of. I did worry a little bit, how things would go if I left. But so things went really well for me for about 4 years, just really mostly because of being patient and focusing on learning as much as I can, and really and building strong relationships with the clients. A lot of my clients I consider friends, and I think that's part of what has helped me succeed now as a freelancer, is that, or as an independent consultant, is that those relationships sometimes speak louder than results. Anyone can deliver like tactical documentation, but to understand the big picture of what's really going to take care of them and their business is, I think, not as easy to find. And so, really caring, I think, is what has set me apart, both when I was in the agency setting and now.
Yep.
But about 4 years into that, I realized, okay, there were some changes happening at the agency. And I had, actually, to be honest, I was a little bit burnt out on SEO. Being in such an SEO specific agency for so long, I was sort of just tired of the tactics. And, there was so much uncertainty, because this was a very tactical agency. I
Hmm.
guess I can say that. Their tactics were always changing because, with every algorithm change, there were, new things that we needed to do. And I just felt it wasn't the right fit for me, because I was always uneasy about some of the tactics that were being used. Some of them I would call now, spammy tactics.
Yep.
And I wanted to get out. I was looking into other fields, trying to figure out, like, what else could I do? I knew that SEO, my background and experience with that, would help me wherever I went. But then this opportunity to go to a more design and branding oriented agency popped up. That was Sucre Agency in Solana Beach. And I am so thankful that I had that opportunity to go and work with them, because it sort of re-inspired me about SEO, because it showed me that SEO is not just these tactics to, get people to your website in sort of manipulative ways. It showed me that you can incorporate SEO understanding and overall strategy into everything that you're doing, whether it's design or development or branding stories. And it sort of became fun for me again. And not only that, but
Yeah.
it showed me that I really love design. And, sort of a hobby and passion of mine has been photography for a long time. And, having that creative eye for photography, which took me a long time to learn, it was a good fit for coming into a more design and branding oriented agency, and being able to bring SEO together with more of the creative side was a really fun thing for me. And I actually was brought on to help build up their SEO department.
Hmm.
And so it was sort of new to them, but I love their approach was brand first. It was never like SEO tactics, how are we going to get more traffic to the site? It was always, okay, SEO should complement or supplement the brand, never the other way around. And so, yeah, that was a really great experience for me. I was there for about 2 years and loved it. It was such, I loved the people I worked with, were very passionate. I loved the brands that I was working with. I really appreciated how selective they were about the brands that they chose to work with. Whereas other agencies might take on any and everyone, this one knew like we're only going to work with brands who are, doing something good for society, for the community, and working with brands who we can actually help and make a difference for. So that was a really fun couple of years for me. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that work is a lot more rewarding to sort of be a strategic partner as opposed to just being a vendor, or as opposed to trying to go after just tactical things like just generating traffic or generating things that aren't really, you don't really know what the end game is. So one thing that I thought was really interesting that you said, and I did write an article on this that I'll link to in the show notes, but basically I think we all sound the same as marketers for the most part when we say what we do. When you say I do SEO, I do link building, I do these different tactical things, it's hard to not sound the same when somebody's buying services from us. So way that you've been able to differentiate yourself, and this is what I recommend that we all do as much as possible, is you became both a strategic partner of these clients of yours, but also they were invested in you helping them. So like you had said, it's not so much worried about the daily performance of the campaigns. It's, do I want to work with Sheena? And that really goes a long way when it comes to selecting a client, because ultimately we can't share a lot of case studies as to our results. We can share sometimes that we got results for clients, but usually we all say we do the same services. And from a client trying to pick out the vendor that they're going to choose, it becomes really difficult because everybody sounds pretty much the same on the website and they say they do the same things. And if you can't share great case studies, then who do you choose? And ultimately, I found that the business that I get is because people choose me because they want to work with me personally, not necessarily because of anything else. And so you can write all you want to, you can do all these different things, but the relationships are really important. And the relationships are what help you, like you said, go on your own successfully. Those are the things that deliver the results that are really looking there. And when you take a long view on things, like I'm not worried about if we had a little small traffic drop this month, I'm worried about what we're going to be doing next year and the years into the future. That's the best relationships. And usually that's the longest relationships too. We're not focusing on those little things.
Yeah, there's actually someone who I consider, he was actually a client at one point and he's retired now, and I consider him somewhat of a mentor. And I was actually having a conversation with him about a week ago, and he's just had an incredibly successful career, having sort of a personal advisory for some of the largest brands in the world, like Coca-Cola and some others. And I asked him, like, what was the key to your success? And he had a pretty clear answer. And that was always being focused on the big picture and not getting too consumed with, the day-to-day tactics, like really understanding the overall goals and the big picture of what we're striving for. But then also always be focused on the future and doing your best to forecast and understand like what's coming next and how can we be, on the forefront of that. And so I thought that was just really valuable insight. It's something that, it's easy to forget the value of those two things. And I was so thankful that he had brought that up to me. And I actually, whenever I have those little nuggets of wisdom, I write them down and have them somewhere visible where I can just constantly be reminded of those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I think really what I've learned over the years is the role of marketing in this whole thing. So it's to keep an eye on the big picture and to keep an eye on what we're trying to achieve, because we came into this and it sounds like we're both sort of accidental marketers. We never really planned on it. We just sort of became part of the marketing department because of our other skills. But there are marketing departments, and really what we need, what way that we mature in this whole world of marketing is to get more focused on how do we create these long-term plans that we can go through, and not even necessarily plans, but just long-term results that we're looking for, and ride the wave into the future. And that's really where the best marketers end up being focused, is not so much on if I do this, I'm going to get this result. It's much more overarching than that. So it's good that you got that advice and that you're able to heed it. And then you also, seems like your career is sort of getting that direction as well. So instead of focusing on just the tactics, which I think we need to have a strong understanding of the tactics in order to really be good. Like if we don't have any understanding of the tactics, it's really hard to get anything done. But at the same time, the evolution going to the next step where we're now focused on long-term strategies is a really good career path progression to go through.
Absolutely.
Great. And so you had mentioned that you went on now to start your own agency, or you're working on your own. Can you give me a little bit of information about that? Like what made you choose that decision and how it's going so far?
Absolutely. So, looking back at my time at various organizations, I think if I'm honest with myself, I think I was always meant to be an entrepreneur and sort of work more autonomously. And but there's so much fear that comes with that. There's risk taking and the instability of not having potentially a stable paycheck and the benefits. And I know that you had shared the article that I wrote up about how I went in that direction, and all of those things were just from the heart of just what went into making that decision and how I made it happen. But ultimately, what ended up pushing me in the direction was actually a pretty scary health issue that I encountered last year. And it was sort of a wake up call. And I'm so grateful that, everything turned out okay, but it could have been a lot worse. I actually was injured while surfing. That's a big pastime of mine, a passion. And my husband and I were surfing, and it's actually on my 27th birthday. And I guess I went down a little hard on a wave during a bigger hurricane, and got whiplash in my neck. And for the next 10 days, I had a really, really bad headache. And I went to the ER finally, and they discovered that I had torn both of my vertebral arteries. And
Oh my.
I remember when I was in the hospital, I was like, what's a vertebral artery? I couldn't even say it. I had no clue. And, come to find out, two of the four main arteries that send blood to your brain, I had torn and had clots in them. And I experienced at the ripe age of 27, a mini stroke. And what a wake up call. I ended up being in the hospital for 12 days. And it was just, 12 days of a lot of perspective and really thinking deeply about what matters to me. And of course, those are the things that consumed my life for a long time was, very much my career and growth and figuring out how I could get to the next level. And of course, I'm very, very blessed to have a wonderful family. And my husband was by my side those 12 days in the hospital. And I just realized my priorities are off. And, one of the things that, going off on my own and working independently, I sort of always considered a dream. But I think when you encounter a health scare like that or any type of tragedy, it sort of gives you new perspective on what really matters. And for me, it was like, well, this is a dream. Like, if I don't do it now, I may never get the chance. And I had talked with a number of people, clients, friends, people I considered somewhat of mentors. I actually opened up with one in particular who I really admire. And I just shared hey, I want to let you know that I'll be going independent come the new year. And, I know that we've worked together for a long time, and I would love your opinion. And that was a really scary thing for me to do, to be transparent about that, because he could have reacted in so many ways, but he ended up reacting with so much support and encouragement, and just really boosted my confidence. Okay, I can do this. I'm going to make this happen. And, it's been only about I launched in April officially. It took a good amount of time of planning.
Yeah.
But the plans were always this might happen, it might not happen. But then, it happened, and I launched in April, and things have been going so well. I'm very, very fortunate to have received some really great referrals and working with brands that I really admire. So yeah, what really sort of pushed me in that direction was a bit of a health scare, but
Wow.
one that I'm very thankful for.
Wow, that's it's such a lemons to lemonade type moment then. I mean, the way that you describe it now, I'm sure that it was scary as can be. I mean, it still sounds scary just to hear what you went through, but to see how you came out of it and really turned it into the opportunity that you have in front of you now and really gave you focus. And I think that's an important turning point to think about, is that sometimes we think about doing something and it does take time to realize that life is short and we need to get these things done. And a lot of times that's when we're most productive. It serves as the motivating factor we need when things aren't going well. And it also just gives us that encouragement to keep on going about things. And so it's cool that you're able to do that. And then the other thing that's important for everybody else to hear is if you're looking at going out on your own, which I've done twice in my career now, just completely went out on my own, you need to do a lot of planning. So it's even if you have that conclusion that you're going to go out on your own, you don't do it the next day. You really need to make sure that you have some kind of nest egg or savings or a spouse or significant other who can help with payments and things like that. And then also you need to get advice from people. You need to talk around, say, is this something that I should be doing? Is this easy to do? What stumbling points are there? And then you need to line up clients. If you don't have the clients lined up, or at least a lead on how you're going to get some clients, it's really difficult to fill it out. And so it sounds like you did all your homework during that process and were able to hit the ground running.
Yeah, I was very fortunate because there was a lot of planning, a lot of thought that went into it. But when it comes to working with clients, like things happen very naturally. It was being open with certain people about what my hopes and plans were. And, I think I was very humble and transparent about a lot of those things. And I realized that when you are humble about a lot of like just humble in general, it seems that people actually want to see you succeed. Especially if you have, a working relationship or friendship with that person in the past, and then you open up in ways that maybe they didn't expect. And I don't know, I've just had this outpouring of people who, believe in me and want to see me succeed. And some of that started because I was pretty generous with my time and energy prior to all of this. So that really strengthened some of those relationships, like doing pro bono work with projects that I believe in, and really that was just to get experience for the most part.
Yep.
But those led to incredible relationships and connections and then referrals that have now built my business.
Yeah. How did you go about deciding which things to do and how did you, excuse me, let me back up a second. So I always talk about like personal brand and just building up your own equity. Was that an intuitive thing for you, or did you say to yourself, I need to start forming relationships because it might help me down the line? Or is it just more pure than that? Just like, I just want to help people, and that's what I'm interested in. And if good things happen, then good things happen.
I think it's sort of just part of who I am as a person. I really love hearing, people's stories and getting to know them. And when it comes to, the projects that I ended up being involved with, a lot of it started because I was having a lot of fun with SEO, especially, in the beginning when I was just learning all of these different strategies and tactics. And I remember actually one website in particular was a blog that I had followed for a couple of years, actually. And I just loved this family. It was a husband and wife blog, and they had, two children, and they had a lot of traffic. But, I was trying to figure it out, how much traffic did they actually have using, different tools like SEMrush, and trying to get an idea of how they were doing. And they were doing really, really great. But I reached out to them. I just sent them an email, and they received thousands of emails a week, I'm sure. But I remember my headline was something like, SEO specialist loves your blog. That was like the subject line. And then I just opened up the email and was like, I'm such a big fan. I love what you guys are doing. This is what I do as a profession. And, I always would love the opportunity to apply what I'm doing professionally, with something that I care about or believe in.
Yeah.
And, I would love the opportunity to just like help you guys out a little bit and, not charge you. I believe in what you guys are doing and would love to, send some tips your way. That ended up paying off.
I was gonna say, this sounds like the first time in the history of SEO emails that somebody sent an email with SEO in the subject line and it was actually targeted and legitimate. Did you address it, dear sir or madam?
Right. So yeah, it ended up paying off hugely for me because the thing is, they were doing such a great job already. As we know, these bloggers, people are just creating great content. that's what search engines love. And so they're doing really, really great already. But I was able to give them a handful of tips like, get your XML sitemap in place and like, do these different things to help resolve just a handful of, kind of technical SEO issues. They had some site-wide duplicate content, just things that were easily fixable, but they would never have otherwise known how to fix it or that it was even an issue. And it ended up really helping their SEO results. The timing also, I think, worked out really, really well for them because they're a brand that fits nicely with the rise of Pinterest. And so, the help that I provided them along with, just the time that we were in, their site just skyrocketed. But what ended up being so amazing and that I could never had predicted was that they, later have connections with some of, the major like home design brands out there. So like Oprah and Lowe's, they have aligned with Lowe's now, and they have aligned with a number of home decor and improvement companies that now I have a connection to and that I'm in, I still have a strong relationship with them because it happened so, out of my desire to just help them. With nothing, I wasn't expecting anything in return, but they have since referred brands my way that I probably would never have had the opportunity to talk with, if it wasn't for that.
That's amazing. I mean, that's one of the best examples I've ever heard of cold emailing somebody, talking to somebody. And I've told my students, and, since I do a lot of teaching, I've told the students, sometimes what we need to do is we need to suck it up and work for free in order to get people to trust us, in order to get in front of that. And so here's an example of doing that. You said, hey, I think I can help you out. And the other thing that's interesting is, as a blogger myself, I spend so much time trying to create that asset in the first place, which is the blog post or whatever is in there. Even though I personally know a lot about SEO, it's really hard to do SEO on your own stuff because you're so focused on just getting it done. So finding a relationship with somebody who can create content, because that's often one of the toughest things for SEOs is to just get good content. Finding somebody who writes good content but hasn't had the time to optimize, you take those two things and you put them together, both, just cleaning up duplicate content, making sure they have a findable XML sitemap, even just putting the Yoast plugin on their blog if they don't have it already, you can get exponential results. We're talking like doubling traffic overnight just from doing some simple things. And so if we're all short of ideas as to where we can get wins, that's a good place to look, is bloggers who, the economics of blogging doesn't mean that if you're a really strong blogger, you might make a lot of money, but a lot of people are sort of floating along and doing that. So if you can double their traffic, you're probably going to double their revenue and make a big impact. Now, it's hard to guarantee that somebody like Oprah or the Oprah Winfrey Network is going to contact you, but look at what it did for you, and able to, just giving away some of your knowledge to the right people can set you up for a long-term success.
Yeah, and I've seen it. I personally, it's happened. I can replicate that strategy, even though I didn't intend it to be a strategy. It's just who I am as a person. Like, I love helping people, even if it's for free. I have fun. If I have some knowledge that could benefit this brand or this effort that I believe in, then why not share it? Like, and it's happened time and time again for me. Whether it's a brand that isn't sure if they need my service or not, and so it's like, hey, let's just, I have a couple ideas. Let me share them. I'll send them your way. Or like I had shared with a number of people online, like the value in inviting people along to conferences.
Yes.
Like, that's a thing that, similar to sharing my actual know-how or sending you a handful of tips, like, hey, come to this conference with me, and like trying to empower people to understand what I'm trying to work towards. And sometimes that can lead to really great things. So for me, inviting, brand contacts along with me to conferences led them to really understand, okay, the big picture of SEO and digital marketing. And now one of them is actually, a couple of them are clients of mine. So really, I think the big lesson there is, don't be scared of giving away your knowledge. And I think empowering people only speaks volumes about who you are as a person.
Yeah. You wrote a blog post about this that I'll link to in the show notes, but I love your philosophy around bringing clients to, like you said, bringing prospects and bringing your clients to conferences. And they generate ideas, they get inspired. It does so much more for your overall prospects with a client to have them educated and inspired than it does to sort of be the gatekeeper for information. Because the reality is that we all learned these digital marketing tactics and techniques somehow. We learned it from other people. We learned it from blogs. There's very few completely proprietary ideas in the world of online. There's probably zero. And so if we learned it somewhere, they can learn it too, and somebody else can learn it. It's really, once again, it's all coming down to these relationships you form and how people feel about working with you. If they feel good about working with you and the results are good, you're much more differentiated than anybody else that's out there. And so you can continue on that for a long way. Now, my question for you about that is, how much time would you recommend that somebody dedicates to doing that piece, like the free work or the pre-work, versus, I'm guessing your agencies, or you're doing really well right now. How do you handle the workload that's on hand versus time spending generating new interest and just going out there and finding new clients?
That's a good question. I think I guess I would say that was something I definitely did more of prior to going full-time independent. Now I'm right about at capacity. And so unfortunately, I don't have as much time to be able to do those sort of pro bono projects as I wish I had. It was something that I did more of when I was, working at an agency full time. And I loved the idea of doing like side projects, but contractually, I wasn't able to actually be paid for side projects. And I didn't really care about that. So I was like, well, I can still help them out. I'm not, breaking any rules in that way. These are just causes I believe in, or, a website that I really admire and follow. So why not help them out? So it was more pre-launching my business. Right now with, the contracts that I have, the partners that I have, it's not something that I'm investing as much time into. So I would say if it's someone that has plans to go independent or, launch their own agency, whatever that might be, do as much of that sort of pro bono work now, to build those relationships as you can. It's something that, yes, you'll put in a lot of hours now, but it'll pay off later with those relationships. And also just that experience, there's working in an agency, there's only so many brands that you get to work on. And actually you end up getting to touch a lot of different brands, but actually getting all of, the strategy and tactics implemented is a different story. And that was a big frustration I had working in an agency setting, is there were so many barriers to actually getting to where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And that was because of, there's a lot of politics and departmental silos. Whereas now as an independent consultant, I can work much more as a partner or even an in-house person.
Yep.
A lot of my clients, I think what they appreciate is that I don't act as a consultant. I don't act as someone that's like coming from the outside and telling them what to do. They can Skype me, they can text me. I'm available. I make myself very, very available as though I was an in-house person. So yeah, to answer your question, I would say do as much as you can prior to launching any sort of new endeavor.
Yep.
But because you probably won't have the time to do it once you go that route.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have the time to do it, there's always a temptation to expand, to grow your business, to get there. But that's a good thing. I mean, it's good to grow a business, but sometimes that does take you away from doing the work. So it's always there's two sides to that, is that you can spend all your time doing business development, but then you'd need to bring somebody in to handle the hands-on work. And that can be frustrating. But what your technique is what I call planting seeds, putting as many seeds out there as you can in order to see what might grow, because we don't know what's going to grow in the end, but we know, if we go out there and we get goodwill with all kinds of different people, things come along in different ways. I get contacted from people that I talked to 5 years ago when they're finally ready to go and do something all the time. I get all kinds of different leads and opportunities, and it usually doesn't happen right away. So it's really hard to attach a return on investment of a speaking gig or an article you wrote. But these are things that really just overall build your profile up and make it so that you're top of mind with people when they're ready to make a decision. And that's, if you're going into the agency world, that is something that we should do. And like you said, it's a lot easier to do it when you're not busy, when you're not to the point where you're at your capacity or filling these things in there. So it's like you said, like all along, it's always important to get things in order before you go out on your own, because once you get on your own, it's chaos and you're sort of going and putting out fires and going through so many different things that you need to focus on. So the earlier you can do it, the better off it is.
Yeah, it definitely can be a little bit of chaos. One thing I wanted to add is just that when you plant those seeds, just how crucial it is that you're genuine about it. I think we can all see through sales pitches.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's a planted seed for that's self-serving, then it's not going to work. I
Hmm.
think that that's where it's worked out really well for me. Is that I mean, like from my heart, like I want to see these companies succeed and I have ideas that I want to share. And if they pay me for them, great. But even if they decide like we're not ready for that type of partnership,
Hmm.
typically I'll still share some of those ideas with
Yep.
them just because I can't hold them back.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, I mean, you're building up a lot of goodwill and a lot of opportunities, and you're not necessarily focused on what's going to be the most important thing to do today. You're saying, I'm setting myself up for the next 10 years. I mean, we can all learn from that to set ourselves up well into the future, because people are going to be around for a long time in this industry. Even though it seems really vast when you get started, it's pretty darn small. There's only so many vendors and agencies, and you come across the same people over and over again over time if you do this long enough. And so being genuine and making sure that people really value you and that you're not doing the things that you're talking about that you shouldn't be doing, that is exactly the way that you stay occupied in this industry, the way that you stay both relevant and employed and gainfully employed in this industry. Great. So we've used up quite a bit of time, but this has been an awesome conversation. I think we could talk for another 2 hours if we wanted to, but I'm trying to keep these things in a certain time frame. So what I want to do is just ask one last question, and that is, for somebody looking to get into this industry or looking to start their own agency, perhaps, what advice do you have for a new marketer?
So I actually have a couple, if that's okay to share.
Yeah, of
And,
course.
first I want to start with a few practical tips that were given to me or that I had learned. And one of them, this was actually shared to me with me by a colleague, and that is to not accept a title change without a raise. And as someone, I remember being very young in an agency setting, that's all you want to do is grow in the company and you want to get that to that next title. But this gal pointed out to me when I had this happen, like they were wanting to promote me with a title, but not a raise. And I was so glad that before anything happened, she sort of again spoke some truth into me and was like, hey, like make sure this doesn't go down in that way because it only really benefits one side,
Hmm.
the agency or the employer. They look better if they have more senior employees. But if it's not benefiting you financially, you sort of need to hold off and respectfully decline until you have that conversation about compensation.
Yeah.
Other ones that I think helped me succeed that I share a lot with students, like when I go and speak at different universities, is to take charge of something that's been either forgotten or just left on its own. And that really makes the company need you. And if you're an intern, this is especially important if you're hoping to be hired on. That was a really good practical tip that I learned in my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Take ownership of something, and just because somebody neglects it doesn't mean that it's not important. So bringing it
Mhm.
back into that realm where it is important.
Yeah. And then a few others that are maybe a little less practical is just to understand that not everything needs to be backed by data. I think that something that my clients really appreciate about working with me is that I tend to pull a lot from my personal experiences as a consumer. And, sometimes common sense can go really, really far in business strategy. And I think it's okay. There's this saying that I love that is to go boldly, but not blindly. And your personal experiences and your opinions are so valuable as long as they're informed. And I think that that's something, if you keep that in mind and realize that there is a place for emotion in the workplace
Hmm.
without being considered, overly sensitive or emotional. Those are things that I think more marketers should be thinking about. And it's something that can really set you apart. And then lastly, this has been a big lesson for me. And that is that nothing is easy. And to not let your efficiencies diminish your expertise or your value. Because the more years that go on, the more efficient you get with your projects, it's easy to, diminish the value of your work and make it seem like what you're doing is like oh, that'll just take me a couple hours.
Yep.
And when in reality, like it takes you a couple hours because you've been in this for 10 years. And so that's been a big lesson for me to not devalue either how technical something is or how much time and effort and experience different things require.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't fall into that hourly rate trap when your value is what you're pricing on. So price on value, not based on hours. I absolutely agree with that. You should be getting paid for the 10 years leading up to that time, not just the time that it takes to push the button or to do something. And go boldly, but not blindly. That is brilliant. It's one of my favorite quotes that I've ever heard. It's when it comes to it, because I think that, I preach data-driven marketing and I'm very data-driven with what I do, but there's some things that go beyond the data, or some things that the data just doesn't explain. And it doesn't explain the why. It doesn't understand emotion, and it doesn't understand, like, if you just went based on data, you would only be able to recreate things in the past. It's really getting at that why and the story behind it that helps you get the results into the future. So use data and use it to inform your opinions, but then there's some things that will never have the data align with it, or that you can't be sure that it's going to work. And those are usually the things that work the best.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Sheena. I really appreciate having you on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Any closing thoughts?
Gosh, you saved the most difficult question for the end. Huh?
Yeah.
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I think just one thing in this field that can sometimes consume us as, being in a marketing trade, that sometimes there isn't like a wrong or right way to do things. I think being informed and being confident and being careful to not let fear just overtake you. I think that was something I struggled with a little bit in the first couple of years, feeling, very unqualified, or, too young, or too that, or whatever it was. And fear was a big issue for me. And it took a number of years to get past that and realize that, okay, as long as I know more than the other person that I'm talking to, then I have something of value to offer. So,
yeah. I always like to say that other marketers are like deer, or like animals. They're just as afraid of you as you are of them. We think there's this grand conspiracy that everybody has more knowledge than us, but it turns out that everybody is just trying to make it up as they go along, and even faking it till they make it. And in reality, we think things are going to work. We have case studies and everything, but it really comes down to execution and getting people interested in what you have to say, and getting people interested in the product or service you're trying to sell. That's really what marketing comes down to in the end. It's that simple. Great. Well, thanks for joining me today, and we'll share the show notes and get going from there. So thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you. Talk to you later.
Wow, I can honestly say that it's one of the best stories I've ever heard about generosity and how it can lead to positive results. She helped out those bloggers, delivered great results, and that opened up so many doors. But the important thing here is that she didn't set out to do any of that. She just wanted to help. It's easy to fall in the trap of trying to focus on activities that will pay immediate dividends. And yet we have another example of a successful marketer doing activities with no expectation of reciprocation. We can all learn from Sheena. For show notes, visit Jeffalytics.com/Sheena.